Howdy, y'all. We're going to talk a little today about Seraphon's power pairs. Now, you may be asking, what is a power pair? You may have heard that terminology around a little bit. What that means is you've got a couple units that go really well together, and they want to kind of stick together. They want to deploy together. They're going to buff each other, and they'll increase their effectivity on the battlefield. The reason you'll want this is because you can't always just turtle up in your deployment zone in a game type. We've got a couple game types here on the screen, and these are ones that are a little bit more difficult for some armies to play. You know, you tend to want to group your entire army around your home objective, that one objective you're going to keep, and then try to project power out from there. Now, Seraphon's pretty good at that because we do have a lot of movement shenanigans. We are fast. We have teleports. We can do a little bit of summoning. And so we can play better at that objective game than some armies can. But we still want to try to build some power pairs into our army list building as we go along. It becomes even more apparent when you're in an objective like a game type like Scorched Earth, where you have 4 objectives, and can you put a threat on each one of those objectives that can push forward when they need to. So as we're going to look today, I'm going to try to keep this Scorched Earth in mind as we look at our power pairs and try to keep to where we have 4 power pairs in an army for list building purposes so that maybe we could play that game type effectively. So we're going to start off looking at a couple of them and see what we can come up with. I think the first pretty obvious one here is our Skink power pair. And what this involves is our horde of 40 skinks, which didn't change in price in the FAQ. So we have our 40 skinks at only 240 points, and we're buffing those with our Skink Star Priest and our Skink Priest. Now, Skinks on their own are not very good. They hit on 5s and 5s. Yeah, it's 80 shots, but you're not going to do much damage. But once you pair them up with these 2 little foot heroes, all of a sudden their damage increases quite a bit. You see the damage table down there. It's at about 15 damage to a 4-up save, which is good. We've got stuff that does more damage than that, but one of the Skink's biggest advantages is its speed, its kind of flexibility, and its number of bodies. With these two heroes here, these Skinks have a lot of board presence because they can reach out and touch things 30 something inches away from you, depending on which faction you put them into. But they can do a lot of damage from range, and they can get all over the board as needed. So that whole pair comes in around 430 points, which fits under my kind of arbitrary 5. I'm trying to get these on 500 points for each group. An excellent power pair. I think you'll see this one a lot especially in Fangs, in Draco's Tail, but you'll also see these over in Coalesce, maybe in Thunder Lizard as well. If they just need bodies and you've got some extra points, bring in a horde of bodies that can still do some damage for you. Another power pair is a Kroak. So we're getting the 2 filthy ones out of the way here at first. The Kroak power pair is one that you will probably play a lot. You may see this one a lot. Lord Kroak on his own isn't really that much of a threat. He's a support piece when he's by himself. At 320 points, if you're just taking him, he's there for command points and for 1 spell, basically. But once you start stacking on these synergies, he all of a sudden becomes a little scary. So we're adding him plus the Astrolith Bearer for 140, a Source Guard for 100 points to take away wounds that he takes. They can absorb the wounds on a 2-up that he would normally have to allocate. And also a Balewind Vortex. And you'll see this is a graphic from the Lord Kroak video that we did, maximizing his range. And once you get him up on that Balewind, that gives him a +6 to his range, and the Astrolith Bear gives him another +6. And you've moved him forward a little bit with the Balewind on the first turn, and now you've got this huge range of area that he can do his area of effect mortals on. And so that grouped right there together, it is 600 points. I was trying to keep him under 5. This one goes above just because we need to get that whole group together. It's an excellent pairing, and I think you'll see this in a lot of armies as kind of the starting point for especially magic-heavy armies or things that you need to control that magic phase while doing some damage at range. So very good power pair there. Next one we're going to look at is the Terradons. Terradons are kind of interesting. They were okay in the last book. There were some people that had some pretty good use with them, and they got a huge points drop this turnaround, and they still do a lot of damage. They're very, very fragile. They have a 6-up save, but these guys, they can scream across the table. They have 16-inch move, and in fangs you get an extra 3 inches on that. And so these guys, you don't have to put anything into them to get them across the table turn 1. They are that fast. Here we're gonna pair up 9 of them for 270 points, and that is incredibly cheap. You read that right. 270 points for 9 of the Flappy Boys. And we're going to give the Terradon Chief, which is a 70-point hero that gives an amazing buff. This guy will probably get sniped off the board if you're not careful, but he's going to stick right along with the Terradons. He's so fast. What he does, he gives, when they're dropping their rocks on people, they have an ability that lets them drop a rock for mortal wounds, and he lets them do it on a 2-up. And so this pair here is incredibly cheap. 340 points and a lot of movement, flying. They still have quite a few wounds. They have 3 wounds each. So it's not bad. Their save is terrible. These guys are the definition of a glass cannon. But when you fly them across something, plus their shooting, which is it's okay. It's not going to do a ton of damage. It's okay, though. It'll clear off some screens. And you're looking at about 24, 25 damage for these guys for 340 points. And so, a heck of a table presence as being able to get all the way across the board. So I really like that pair. If you've got Terradons, they are a lot of fun. Next one we're going to look at is the Engine of the God power pair. Now, this one's an easy one. This one is an Engine of Gods for 260 and a Slon for another 260. You can also put in a Kroak if you want to, and that if you're already taking Kroak, you can add on this Engine of Gods for basically the same thing. But what this does is this lets your Engine of Gods have some different options on his Cosmic Engine roll. Beforehand, you would only have access to the first 3. If you pair up a Slon with him, you have the opportunity to summon some Source Warriors as well. So it gives your army some summoning capability. If you're not taking Starborn, if you're in Coalesce, I use this a lot to get some extra bodies on the board. That's not a great chance at it. It's about a 25% chance you're going to summon. You can see me talk about this Cosmic Engine table here on the Engine of the Gods video. But it's a lot of fun. It's a good combo. The Slon can be great on his own. Even if it's not a Kroak, you can kit out a Slon to be a magical presence. He won't deal as much damage, but he can be pretty terrifying to shut down the enemy's spell capability. So they pair well together to get some extra wounds, to get some extra bodies to summon, especially when you're in Coalesced. I like that. Speaking of Coalesced, the Knights. Some say it's our worst model. Yeah, it may not be our worst model, but it's up there. The Source Knights are pretty derpy looking, but it's a lot of fun on the table. And you can put 10 Source Knights for 200 points. They have decent number of wounds. They have 2 wounds each. They have a good save, and they're in Coalesce, so they're -1 to damage. You're always going to take these guys in Coalesce. But you pair them up with a Scarvet on Carnosaur, and now all of their attacks, which they have a lot of attacks, will get explodes on 6. So when you bring these guys in to combat, charging in probably Kodo's Claw, Coalesced, you're gonna have a ton of different attacks, and they're gonna explode on 6s. So they're gonna be even more attacks. With just those 2 together, using 1 command point from the Scarvet, you're doing 21 damage from these 10 Source Knights. You can't even push that further if you add in a Skink Star Priest. But looking here, trying to keep this under 500 points. And excellent value for 400 points, especially because let's say your Knights get killed. Guess what? You still have a giant Carnosaur behind them to counterattack with. So I love this pairing here. I really like the Source Knights. But for my favorite power pair, the Stegadons. I do love the Stegadons. If you watch my stuff, you probably know that I love the Stegadons. So we've got a Stegadon Chief here with a normie Stegadon, and that racks in at about 490 points, right under 500 point range. And he's got a great command ability, which will add 1 to all the attacks for the Stegadon and for himself. So I'd probably, if I was getting these guys into combat, I would want to do that command point on both of them, just to give them a whole bunch of extra attacks. And just with that, that's the only buff. These 2 guys are going to put out 25 damage versus a 4-up save. And that's with their shooting and their melee. I didn't count the mortal wounds on there when they charge, so we can add a couple more onto that damage table for their mortal wounds. I like this. I like this pair here, especially when I'm running Thunder Lizards. I like to pair up a Stegadon Chief with a Stegadon just to make sure I can maximize that other Stegadon's damage whenever they get into combat. Looking at Thunder Lizards again, we've got the Bastiladon power pair. So I love these two Bastiladons with a Burning Head sitting in between them. Bastiladons are 220 each, and the Burning Head is 40 points. It's a great bound burning spell, or endless spell, because it'll let you reroll ones for those Bastiladons. And in the Thunder Lizard, you're going to shoot those Bastiladons twice each for a command point. And so that Burning Head is going to give you rerolls 1 to hit 4 times in that loadout. And so it becomes well worth its points. Plus, if you need to play offensively with that bound endless spell later, you can. You can shove it forward, do some mortal wounds to an enemy that's coming in, or use it to block off an access point if you need to. Great pair there. These guys, when you're double firing them in Thunder Lizards with that Burning Head sitting in between them, you're looking at about 18 damage. And that's at long range. That's a 24-inch range with 5-inch move, so 29-inch threat range. Pretty nice there. And that actually goes up quite a bit higher. You're looking at 20-something damage, 26 or 27 when you add in if you're shooting against Chaos Demons. Bastiladons hate Chaos Demons, so they get an extra damage on that. So that was pretty nice. So that's all the power pairs that I'm looking through our book at. There are some units that don't need support to make them good. Salamanders don't really need anything. You can add stuff to them, like a Skink Star Priest and a Skink Priest will buff them pretty well, but it's not necessary. Salamanders can do their job without support. They're kind of my teleport target. So every time I'm taking a Fangs list, I'm gonna take in some Salamanders. They're gonna be my teleporting target every time. Chameleon Skinks, they can take heroes to buff them, but usually they're ambushing from off the board, and so they're not gonna be able to take buffs from heroes anyway. And they can do some work on their own anyway. They're basically like the Skink Horde we have. They do about the same amount of damage, and it costs a little bit cheaper than that whole power pair, but don't need any extra benefits. They're way, 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 way more fragile. They have a 6-up save unless you get them all in cover. But they'll, 20 Chameleon Skinks will do about the same amount of damage as that 40 block of Skinks will. Source Warriors. Source Warriors are kind of that weird unit where, on paper, you can buff those guys to the moon. I think we got them up doing like 28 damage in our Source Warrior video, but that's like you have to pour like your entire army into one unit, and then you're not getting many attack. I use the Source Warriors more as just I need bodies on something. They're hard to move, especially in Coalesced, so they're gonna be just kind of a tar pit. So you'll have a hero around them, but there's really no power pair needed for those guys. Usually a Source Old Blood, Source Scar Vet, one of those guys, maybe a Sunblood goes well with them, but it's not really needed. The Kroak kind of same thing. Their output is pretty consistent regardless of what you put on them. You can buff them a little bit. They like to be around Skinks, but everything in our army, basically everything except Source, has a Skink keyword, so they're pretty flexible. Ripperdactyls, just don't take them. I'm sorry, Ripperdactyls just aren't in a good place. They don't have enough attacks to really make all the buffs worth it. They're slower than Terradons. They're a little bit tougher. They have 5-up save, but still not very good. I just wouldn't take them. Same kind of with Razordons. They're okay, but they're just far outshadowed by the Salamanders. Razordons just won't nearly do enough work to, in my mind, justify their points. Dreadsaurian. I don't have a Dreadsaurian. I wish I did. They really need to make a Dreadsaurian in plastic, like a new epic model, and not something on a 280 millimeter base. But I know there's some of you that love the Dreadsaurian, and I like it too. It doesn't really need anything powered up with it. A Salon with it is decently good. It'll help it against spells. But there's not really a power pair that goes along with the Dreadsaurian. He's he's a force on the table himself. So let's look at list building. So, what do we do with these power pairs that we've done? I think it kind of makes it easy for me, and this is kind of how I've list built for a while in my head. When you're daydreaming, when you're thinking about list building, you don't have access to War Scroll Builder. This makes it easy because you're looking at, I need some pairs for my list here. So it makes it real easy to list build. I'm going to take Kroak. I'm going to take 2 units of Skinks. So already we've got our Skink power pairs, 2 of those, and our Kroak power pair. And we've got all our battle line figured out. We've got all our heroes figured out. And we've got about 560 points or 540 points left over, whatever you want. The salamanders are usually a good one to fit in there. So you can kind of be a little bit flexible with it. You can put in a couple Bastiladons. If you don't want to go with Kroak, take a Skink power pair, another Skink power pair, and then 2 Stegadon. Well, 2 Stegadon power pairs. That's an entire army. You've got all your battle line figured out. Well, depending on what army you're putting it into. You've got your monsters figured out. You got your heroes. If you're in Fangs, you probably need to add 1 more unit of Skinks for 60 points. You've got enough extra left over for that. If you're like me and you just go, I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, man, this drawing app is terrible. 4 Stegadon power pairs. There you go. You got your Stegageddon. So I think it kind of makes it easy, at least in my head, to list build. I'm going to create these different power pairs. I know what their role is going to be. I know what they're going to do on the battlefield. And here we go. In our, looking back at this, we see the map and how are we going to lay these guys out? So, if you're on Scorched Earth and you've got, the Stegadons and Skinks, you're probably wanting to put your big hordes in the middle, your 2 big Skink hordes with support. And then your 2 Stegadons on the outsides to kind of do a flanking maneuver at some point, or you can do the same with the Skinks up the middle. You have some options there. These things are kind of self-contained, self-reliant on themselves, on the objectives as they're going in. So I think it kind of helps with deployment, knowing that you've got certain things that you can pair well with each other and put them on the board, deploy them on the board together, and they'll operate independently of the rest of your army. There's a bunch of fun lists out there where you can turtle up real hard, but there's some game types where you can't do that on deployment. And so you need to think about ways that you can project power with the units without the support of your main turtling unit of your army. So, all right. I'm sure I've missed something out there. I'm sure there's some power pairs I've missed. What is your favorite power pair? What do you like to put? What's at the very beginning of your list building? I'm putting these 2 things together in my list, and now I'm building the rest of it. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite power pair is. All right, guys. Catch y'all later.